Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.
The Krulak Center is pleased to bring you this special episode of the Brewcast as part of our ongoing series looking at Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Earlier today, on March 16th, we interviewed Ms. Anna Bulakh, who is currently in Kyiv, and was introduced to us by Dr. Amin Tarzi, Director of Middle East Studies at Marine Corps University and the Krulak Center. There were some small disruptions in the audio and the video, but overall the presentation is quite good, and we were very pleased and grateful to Ms. Bulakh for the discussion. We hope you find it insightful.
Though, I mean, it's a difficult task definitely. But what they expected to take Ukraine in shorter limited time frame, up to 72 hours, right, according to the intelligence, it didn't work out, because I think what they didn't anticipate is the unity of population and inclusion of society, really high level of inclusion and engagement and readiness to deter. And morale, it does actually have a factor in deterrence. So.
Thank you. If you don't mind, what I will do again, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're busy. You are literally under fire. We just heard your president. So I will say greetings. We are very honored to welcome Ms. Anna Bulakh from Kyiv. Since 2010, Anna has been a part of the international think tank community researching international security and resilience policies, including energy, information, and cybersecurity, and broader policies for national resilience, regulation of technology and platforms. She has also worked in corporate intelligence and on open source intelligence. Additionally, she has managed programs helping civil society and public entities to become more conscious about the tools they use to manage information they receive and expose. As of late, she has been part of the tech community working on building solutions that help fighting online disinformation. Thank you, Anna, for taking the time, and thank you for yourself, for your people, for what they're doing for the name of freedom, decency, democracy, and independence. My first question to you is, it is obvious that mainly due to the bravery and steadfastness of the Ukrainian people, its leadership and military, Russia already has failed at his plan to have a quick takeover of Ukraine and present the world with a fait accompli, such as they did after invading and annexing Crimea in 2014, or controlling eastern parts of Donbas region. You and I, when we last met in Odessa, we were actually talking, if you remember, about Donbas, your brother, and based on your observation, both in eastern Ukraine, which is your homeland, on the ground in Kyiv, and an analysis overall, how do you see the next 2 to 3 weeks?
Well, I would start a bit backwards, right? In comparison to 2014, 2022 is dramatically and drastically different. In 2014, Russia has used the disinformation and information campaigns to create societal, to divide society inside of Ukraine, and of course to use information warfare outside. So it used a lot the questions of language and trying to divide societal cohesion in Ukraine. And under the pretext of protection of Russian-speaking population, it staged the occupation of Crimea. It staged also, and supported by its military forces on the ground in eastern Ukraine, the creation of so-called Donetsk and Lugansk republics. And my hometown is in Donetsk, so I definitely do understand deeply how it's to be a Russian speaker in Ukraine. So I would never, agree with the portrait of the world that Russia is trying to feed the international community and tried to feed Ukrainians. How is different in 2022, and looking even information operations, how Russia was conducting, this time it understood that The societal division of Ukraine is not possible. We are more united and coherent because this new new state building in Ukraine, I would call it civic state building on basis of security. So the society of Ukraine is more united for the past 8 years and has been preparing and understanding and learning the nature of hybrid warfare. So in 2021, 2022, Russia launched more disinformation campaign trying to attack economic welfare of Ukraine, trying to take it away from the map of Europe as a prosperous and developing country because we progressed a lot. And what happened in October when the Western intelligence published that Russia's forces are accumulating and building up on border of Ukraine, it created a casus belli. So this time it understandable and this it gave time to analyze and prepare for different scenarios. And I've been a part of the hybrid warfare task force under the Kiev School of Economics, and we've been analyzing first 3 core scenarios according to the regions. And of course, we had a scenario for a full-scale invasion. What we did differently this time, rather than in 2014, we have more functional institutions. We have more integrated and structured civil society engagement. We had the law passed on territorial defense, so the civic population could engage and take up arms, and we also worked with businesses so they could prepare by contingency plans. And this contingency planning was really crucial in terms of when the moment into the invasion that we didn't want to believe, but it put on alert everyone. And the morning of February 24, when I woke up in Kiev from the explosion and this news that it's full invasion and we are at war, of course it was a shock. But nevertheless, when I woke up in the morning, it's our air missile defense system worked out, and so the rocket was shut down. So it means that we actually were preparing for any hostilities. Today is the 21st day of war. What I would say is that Russia's plan of quick invasion didn't work out because they have not entered any major city in Ukraine. So they're planning to do it in short time, 72 hours or so. But what it means in tactical means, so Russia is always opportunistic. So and when it doesn't get on the ground what they want, they refer to the classic weapon of brutal force. So that's why they started to airstrike from the air major cities where they could not control them and could not enter any major city. In the upcoming 2 weeks, and for these 2 weeks, what was the major problem, I think, is that eventually we have more civilians dead than armed forces and other and what it means that Russia has really gone too far conducting its barbaric warfare when it missed achieving its tactical goals in the beginning. And why it's doing it is because it conducts this war of terror to suppress morale of population in Ukraine. But nevertheless, and also they're stretching our armed forces by attacking from different angles. So by outnumbering us and find straight the strike on Yavoriv military. English, I'm sorry for that. So these strikes in Western Ukraine, with strikes, of course, in eastern and northern parts and in Mariupol. So it stretches our forces. But again, it does not get any tactical pluses. So in upcoming 2 weeks, they are going to see more exhaustion of supply chains to supply their forces on the ground. And they already introduced 100% of forces on our territory. That's why those news that they want to recruit fighters from Syria. But what it means for Ukraine, for us, it also means that we are stretching out our forces. We need more provision to defend our sky from the ground, and we need quicker and swifter international support daily. So I think upcoming 2 weeks, I'm not sure that they will change something majorly, but I think it will depend on the armed supplies and international support in armed supplies. Because at this stage, after 4 rounds of negotiations, we didn't see any progress. Even humanitarian corridors, they don't work well. Because Russia is coming with its demands at the table, and those demands of a country that has invaded a sovereign state. And according to those demands, 67% of Ukrainians are not ready, would never be ready to take them. So yeah, that's my case. So to conclude, I don't see that something would drastically change in upcoming 2 weeks. But what could shift it is a swifter help with armed supplies from our Western partners.
Thank you. I just heard your president, His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking to the U.S. Congress just now. And he requested initially a humanitarian no-fly zone, but he is a very astute diplomat, because immediately he offered a second chance. He said something to the effect that if that's not possible, he said an alternative will be something you hinted at. He specifically mentioned S-300s. That is the S-300 or NATO designation SA-10 long-range surface-to-air missile system. And then you also mentioned aircraft. Do you believe that I'm looking back as somebody who's kind of a veteran of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, where once the Stingers, which is a shoulder-fired anti-aircraft system, was introduced in Afghanistan, that changed the war absolutely automatically. Once they could not use their helicopters, that war was very different because it was mostly on the mountains. Once helicopters were taken out of the sky and they didn't have full control over the skies, the war changed. Do you believe that now, short of a no-fly zone, if a air system such as S-300 that your president asked, would that make a major difference in allowing Ukraine those few, time to have a negotiated settlement of this invasion?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the reality is that Ukrainian forces are on the ground. So any political decision to close the sky, I mean, is ultimately the better solution, of course. But in reality, what we are looking at is that we need more portable manpads. We need more portable and anti-aircraft missile systems, and we need to supply them more to the forces on the ground. So about protecting the sky, I mean, there are different solutions that can be also used. We can put more drones up there. We can put the planes higher and to control the lower layer of the air. But for that, we need more supplies, definitely.
And then my last question before I pass on to Major Brown. From what we hear from the peace talks that is ongoing through video conferencing between the Ukrainian side and the Russians, it seems that there's at least a Ukrainian side say that we are the fork, meaning there's a choice now. If there's an immediate ceasefire, again, this goes back to your own background because you do actually come from a place that is now contested. How do you see, if there's a peace that Ukraine accepts not to join NATO and Russia withdraws forces, but leave the situation in Crimea and in Donbass for future negotiations? You mentioned something very interesting initially. You said that situation from 2014 in is changed, you think that there will be a room for a negotiated settlement so Ukraine regains sovereignty over these eastern parts, and then I leave Crimea for the second, do you think that that chance is there, that Ukraine secures its sovereignty as it was before 3 weeks ago, with negotiation going on, maybe peacekeepers from outside, to find a settlement for the eastern part and then Crimea? Thank you.
I would say yes. They created Donbas region into the base of the military and training. So I don't see total and full peace settlement without those territories. So of course, I see a point that Ukraine may negotiate, in terms of full invasion, the withdrawal of military equipment and military forces from the territory of Ukraine, which it brought in after the invasion of February 24. But what's important for us is actually eventually settle the unsettled yet situation around occupied territories in eastern Ukraine, because they're using it as a military base challenge from that territory, and Normandy format is destroyed, is dissolved. So there will be several layers of open questions, and I think this war would not end up without finding a new format of negotiating of Donetsk and Lugansk territories. Why I'm saying that is because exactly at the Munich conference, when President Zelensky was giving his speech, there are several open questions posed to the international community. First, the Normandy format is not working. And look, I'm going to be honest here. This information about France supplying Russia with military equipment under the embargo of European Union from 2015 to 2020, while being a member of Normandy format, I mean, I think it's quite double standard situation in the in its how could shape it. So a Normandy format definitely was not created and in the best terms. So that speech, Vladimir Zelensky, he actually pointed out that we have to review that format of negotiating peace settlement around Donetsk and Lugansk regions. And second is review international security paradigm. It's about security provision for Ukraine. So there will be two questions on the table at this war, because the security provisions of Ukraine, in any terms, they have been not working. And I don't see that Russia feels accountable by any means for ruining all international laws. So yes, the demands would be, of course, withdrawing all forces from all territories, including Donetsk and Lugansk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have many other questions, but I know your time is limited, and I know my colleagues have questions, so I will. Good to see your cat, by the way. Yeah, we have three, so I'm all familiar with that. Major Brown, I'll pass on, and then if there's time, I have one other question, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dr. Tarzi. And Ms. Bulakh, from our end, thank you again very much for your time and your availability to talk with us, so we can share your story and your insights with our audience. I had a few questions, but I also want to give a chance for the rest of our team to talk to you. So I'll do one, and then I'll go through them and see what they have. But my question is, it ties to something you said in your sort of when we were talking before we hit recording, but was the sort of the engagement, the inclusion, the readiness of society at large to sort of unite and resist and fight back in lots of different ways. And it's especially in sort of in the use of information and narrative in terms of using different social messaging platforms, everything from President Zelensky talking to our Congress today, down to individual soldiers on the battlefield, like kind of goofing off on the burned out hulks of, Russian armored personnel carriers. But overall, there seems to be a very a harmonious use of that information, of that kind of messaging across your society. And so I've been wondering for really weeks now, if this is something that is there some sort of like both civic and military training or education that has sort of equipped both the Ukrainian military and the government and the public to sort of work together in this domain? Or is there just like a greater sensitivity, sort of organic in the culture to the use of that? We've been trying to feel because it looks like this is something you can't just like pick up and do at the last minute. Like it something you probably it implies practice and some sort of training, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. So I'm wondering if you have any perspectives or anything you can share on that.
Yes, I think there are several major shifts in Ukraine in terms of more inclusion and engagement. So I've been looking into this area for quite many years, starting from Estonia, comprehensive approach to security and defense. It's how you build this embedded society in security and defense, and when the risk and crisis comes, so the society is engaged in both in kinetic and information terms. So in kinetic, that it would be supporting military and would be highly mobilized, and if not in forces, but would be support forces, and in information space. So the information going undistracted and supporting the kinetic operations. In Ukraine in 2014, we see a huge civic engagement and appraisal grassroots. So it's exactly combination and grassroots organizations filled in those gaps when our military and government were non-functional, when Russia seized and annexed Crimea. So there was they seized and annexed Crimea in around 35 days. But when they entered these forces, and I think those first Chechen battalion or Vostok battalion entered Donetsk, and those days I was there. I flew from Estonia for several days to Donetsk. And that day, my director of think tank in Estonia, he's American, he wrote me, Anna, please get out from Donetsk, because there is this Russian battalion, Vostok, and they're famous for their brutality. They entered Donetsk, so there's something would be happening. And actually, then in several days, they created this blitzkrieg of Donetsk and Lugansk. And who went to fight back Donetsk and Lugansk regions? They were defense volunteers of Ukraine. So many defense volunteers were self-organized and supplied by volunteers, and they filled in this gap of absent that time and organized military forces. Military forces and government switched in and started to fight back. That's why we see now half of Donetsk and Lugansk by Ukrainian government, half of those that we could not take back, like Donetsk, and the Donetsk airport fighting is quite famous. Why I'm telling this story, it's about that exactly from that moment, we've seen how the civic engagement in Ukraine could be institutionalized. So it started to create some forms of organized forms of how being engaged with military and armed forces. And armed forces since then, since 2015, had the highest rate of trust in society. Studying resilience, what resilience actually is in society, it's when there is constant cooperation and communication between government structures and civil society structures. Civil society, I mean those mostly engaged in active members of society, those are around maybe 10-20% in peaceful time. In wartime, they're increasing and mobilizing. And resilience, when I was studying, being part of a Western think tank, and we were conducting some in-depth interviews with defense volunteers in Eastern Ukraine, and I've spent some time for 2 years traveling across the demarcation line. So we're trying to understand the motivation of people actually going and fighting for the territories. They were saying that we are fighting for family security and national security. So this national statehood is actually high factor in motivation, and volunteer organizations also going under the motivation of security of the state and their family. So it's nothing nationalistic, and it's really good as a platform to integrate such motivation into cooperating with public institutions. And for this years, for 8 years, when government was pushing back, trying to push back, maybe being scared that civilians were taking arms. And it took some time for government to understand that to bridge this trust gap, and there are 3 gaps in how to build resilience and whole of society, inclusion, security, and defense, is to narrow down the gap, trust gap, to build communication, constant communication, and to balance the capabilities and capacities, because private sector sometimes have better capacities like in cyber, but public sector has better capacities like in military. And when the law was passed on January 1st on territorial defense, it actually meant there is a huge shift of trust building between society and government. What I mean that government finally opened up a decentralized engagement in defense, giving out the institutionalized platform for civilians to engage and pick up arms and start protecting their neighborhoods. It's one. Also, now huge amount of cooperation with companies in tech sector, in IT sector, when government, Ministry of Digital go directly with companies and specialists and building up IT army in 1 week. It's happening not just it's because government was opening up and building this dialogue with businesses, with tech community, building up this territorial defense structures, because it's highly decentralized and it requires time. And I think it was a kind of small process, like slow process, but important. And it means, and exactly this worked out when the full-scale invasion happened, started. The society knew how it could potentially be engaged, and this trust factor worked out that now 97% of population, they support the armed forces and the president and the tactics what they do.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to now turn it over to our staff here. We're getting some questions in, and I want to let them be able to ask you directly. So first from our director, Ms. Valerie Jackson, sort of on the topic of resilience you're just mentioning. Ma'am, if you want to just go ahead and ask the question yourself.
Yes, hi, Anna. Thank you so much for being available to us and for just your inspirational presence over there. Amin cannot say enough good things about you, and I just think in general, the example that you're showing to the world is heroic. And so, thank you.
Thank you so much
for what you're doing.
But thank you for such kind words.
You're welcome. It gets to what you were touching on with Ian's question previously. But I'm just curious, because I'm very curious to understand what the daily conversation or the daily habits, or just what is it about Ukrainian people that has allowed you to prepare mentally and physically for this invasion? What is there something Because if this were to happen to Moldova or to Poland or to Estonia, like, is there something special in your history? What is it? I just don't know if this is something that can be duplicated in other parts of Eastern Europe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an interesting question. And lately, I think there is underappreciation of studies around the Western academia, even. There are a lot of European and Russian studies. And the Western world have been studying Russia a lot and rationalizing its own vision of post-Soviet space. And Ukraine was actually really understudied. And it's something that I try to work a lot with also when there's a huge comparison of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. I would say straight away, Ukrainians started using their civic rights and demanding them from 90s, and there have been a number of protests and a number of mass protests of a development of Ukraine. So what's happening today? We could see it in 2004. We could see it in 2014. It's when a big amount of people went out to demand the vision of the country. The civic engagement was transformed and fought for with the loss of lives, with blood. But we eventually came to the fully democratic elections, fully transparent elections. And believe me, not everyone was satisfied with Zelensky, and we have huge discourse for many years, and Ukraine has this public discourse of discussing who's involved when it comes to security issues. For the past 8 years, the security of hybrid threats, everyone in Ukraine knows what the word hybrid means. Everyone, of public figures were, when criticizing some failures in reforms, it actually always went in line. Do you want to create vulnerabilities for another attack by Russia? So, and it's really important that for past 8 years, we never forgot about the presence of potential threats, hybrid threats in all spheres. And Council on Security and Defense Council continued this work of blocking the Medvedchuk TV channels, and Medvedchuk is a close friend of Putin, and we continue to work to protect our information space. We were under constant cyberspace. We derived our economic ties from Russia westwards, while actually European Union member states failed to do that. And I think the failure of scrutinizing Russia more, imposing more economic sanctions in 2014, this is a problem that we are facing today. That's why we have a war. Russia did not feel the costs of what they have done in 2014. So there is a difference. First, Ukrainians have learned the hard way of protecting the democracy. We've learned the hard way, and we know that civic rights are the basic right we have. And if we don't like it, we can pick up a Molotov cocktail. And it's really different that we didn't see in Belarus and Russia any violent protection or defendants of the civic rights. So the peaceful, for example, I'm not advocating violent protests, right? But unfortunately, without ruining the basic system of post-Soviet system, it's impossible to introduce any liberal or market or democratic world on old remaining structures of Soviet Union. And we still fighting, have been fighting to clear out all these old structures and old approaches. So I think this is really crucial how civic society acted in Ukraine, and we have had more vibrant dissidents in Soviet Union times that affected intellectual dissidents, that affected and also our history in Ukraine. It's even seen in our anthem that we are always fighting for our sovereignty. Unfortunately, we are fighting with blood, and it's written and it goes into our blood, I think, to fight back for our sovereignty and to be finally perceived and finally accepted in our borders as we are today.
Thank you so much.
And
thank
also,
you.
yeah. Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and also about daily life, what I wanted to add. Well, of course, my daily life is a bit different because I always and my family lived in this understanding of consequences of war and what war is. It's first, we are from Donetsk and we are pro-Ukrainian, and my brother went to fight since 2015. He joined the volunteer. He joined in beginning the volunteer defense battalion, Azov, that is famous even in West and Russia. And Russia is using this battalion on many propaganda and disinformation campaigns. And my family lost everything and moved out from Donetsk, while I was always a part of security and defense policy and studies. Later on, I joined the technical again because of my passion understanding how the technology also affects national security. So our understanding that the war is still here and continuing even in a peaceful Kiev. So I would say we always have been more alarmed maybe than others. And my brother retired last spring, but now with a full-scale invasion, he is now defending Kiev, and he got into hospital 2 days ago. But he's fine. But I'm proud of him. He saved his unit on his leadership decision to withdraw them after being 1 to 4 hours without connection to the command line. But it's a hell. It's a hell what's happening there, and the hell of how Russians are conducting the war, because they basically destroying everything around. And this time, everyone from friends of friends, is engaged somehow into deterrent. So being in tech community, I'm in some chats with tech guys. We are helping in information and cyber to government. Other chats we have trying like to collect supplies and humanitarian and donate. In another chat, I'm helping Minister of Foreign Affairs and Kiev School of Economics to actually communicate on international level, keep and also all colleagues, they somehow they have a friend or the same territorial defense. So it touches everyone. So this war is not happening, and so its armed forces are doing something. It's the whole society is attached and doing something. There is nothing in Ukraine that someone is sitting and waiting. Even those that moved out and became refugees, already 3 million people moved out. They still already connecting and saying, okay, we can organize humanitarian shipments now from the territory of European Union. So I think this level of high engagement and grassroots engagement is really important in what keeps the society still quite on high morale.
Before Ada, sorry, I want to jump in. Based on what you said, I know that you have a curfew in Kiev as of because of what I heard, at least in the media, is that they are making sure that they see who the infiltrators are. How effective, again, because of your experience in Eastern Ukraine, how widespread is the Russian attempt to infiltrate Kiev or other cities, but you're in Kiev, and how successful it is? And then I'll yield to my colleagues.
I'm sure security services would have a better answer, but what I see from open sources, once in 5 days they catch some guys in different cities of Ukraine, in Western Ukraine and in Kiev. So I would not say that it's really a huge amount, but there are definitely some elements of that. So I'm not sure I can help with some kind of statistics, but I don't feel that it's massive. And again, I think territorial defense and inclusion of people that know the neighborhood and know people in the neighborhood is really crucial here. And I see the commission channels. What's also different now is that there are many Telegram bots and direct communication channels to the government security forces that you can submit information about something weird and like someone or something that you saw. You can take a picture, you can upload it and submit, and actually feedback is quite fast because now we are trying to report everything. If we see like a familiar person, if we see the vehicle, if we see the military, Russian military. So this is efficient.
All right. No, thank you, Anna and Dr. Tarzi. We did have another question here from our staff, Lieutenant Colonel Manuel Zepeda, who's our Deputy Director. Sir, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, Anna. Thank you again for your time here. I'm just wondering, from everything that is going on and the situation, it might be difficult to foresee what an acceptable solution to the ongoing conflict could be for both sides. And I'm just, again, looking at from an outsider in. What are, in your opinion, acceptable terms to both sides that would be satisfactory in spite of everything that has already occurred, right? One thing that factors in my mind is capitulation from one side or another. So if this can be avoided, I think, and a resolution could be achieved that is acceptable to both sides, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think for that we have to go back to the basics. It's about security of population. So the basic requirements, what I see is a withdrawal of military forces and their equipment from the territory of Ukraine. So we can really provide peace to civilians. And after that, the negotiations can go around security guarantees for Ukraine and something that Russia started the war about. But the problem today is that any negotiation about even humanitarian corridors have been brutally violated, and the war crimes are being documented. And the war crimes are basically the shelling humanitarian corridors where just women and children are trying to find a safe place and trying to be evacuated. So any further solution is really to withdraw the military and forces and give them an order not to shell civilians, because intelligence and various sources say that the Russian military have been given permission to shell wherever they want. And this barbaric warfare is, if it's confirmed that it is an official order given to the Russian forces, I think this is the first precondition to stop it. Then to withdraw military and armed force, military equipment and forces, and then start talking about demining. We would have a huge problem with that of all territory, reconstruction and reparation, and talking about security guarantees. I don't see, other solution other like we need to secure population.
Yes, very, very candid and straightforward. Thank you.
Great, thanks, sir. So for anyone else on our staff, if you have any more questions, just go ahead and throw it in there. get to it. I did have I wanted to maybe shift a little more into your direct professional experience in terms of, working in cyber and some of the technology sides within Ukraine. And I was wondering if you could maybe go into perhaps some of the unique challenges, that you working in that sector for Ukraine have faced in terms of, cyber attack and defense, finding appropriate technology that, makes those networks and makes your society more resilient from those kind of attacks, and whether there are any different challenges for the civilian side or the military/government side in that respect.
Yeah, on technology and on cyber, right? It's separate tracks. It's protection of critical infrastructure of Ukraine, and we've seen a major cyber attack. We've been conducting last year this analysis of protection of critical infrastructure from cyber attacks, and it goes down to the basic protocols that public and private companies had to undertake and to protect the infrastructure. I think what helps still Ukraine that everything is not still fully 100% digitalized. It is in the West. So technologies separated. So operation and cyber attack goes through IT. So it does not touch OT. And also there are kind of some cases that basically you can unplug the structure from outside world and not to allow cascade to go through the electricity systems or any other critical infrastructure. So I think Ukraine prepared quite well after lessons learned, big attacks in 2015, 2017, and already synchronizing with European electricity network. And actually, this fast integration has already been in Ukraine, will be synchronized with so it potentially means that we will desynchronize from Russia and Belarus, and they will stay in their own isolated circuit. And because Baltic states also desynchronize from Russia and Belarus. Unfortunately, what I have done this time with critical infrastructure electricity, it's physical attack on the nuclear power plants and PPs that is a big region in Chernobyl. And we've been assessing those threats in security scenarios, even in Ukraine is isolated and in danger. So being desynchronized from them, it's a good step forward, but I think is the first question how to secure power plants. And on the other side, it's about basically cybersecurity protection of private and government sector. I would say that for the past 8 years, this area has improved quite well. And again, as I told that in this invasion, Russia have not shown, or maybe we have not shown fully yet its full cybersecurity capability, but Ukraine has deterred efficiently. What they have managed to do well at this stage is defacing websites and everything. So defacement of websites is basically changing the outlook of a website or government structures. Does not require anything on networks or putting down communication networks. I think because they still also using operations, so it's not in their favor to completely to put down conductivity. How Ukraine again could build up its expertise and capacity to actually deter. Yeah, I think it's really around engaging a lot specialists from highly capable or IT sector, and it proved kind of workable. And try and already pass into the why in this war for offensive bought time, because there's basic DDoS attacks. They kind of redirected Russia's attention to deal with them rather than go on offensive further on our territory. And in cyber domain, I would say that we entered a bit global warfare because already anonymous groups already joined also on offensive against Russia and not from territory of Ukraine. So this warfare is already not limited to the space of Ukraine and Russia, limited to the internet space, but it's already broader. And again, it's interesting that is given its roots that from the West, those that anonymous groups that aligned with Ukraine, all those hacktivists even, they're driven by defending the values of Western democracy, right? While that sphere is actually trying to attack. I never encourage any hacktivism in peacetime. But today, in these circumstances, it could buy us sometimes that Russians would progress in offensives on our territory. And again, why Ukraine became more resilient in cyber terms. It's about building this cooperation between, it's PPP, public-private partnership more, and more platforms for sharing experience and expertise on vulnerabilities and approaches.
Great, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions.
Yeah, and one thing. When from October till November, December, and January, as part of this hybrid task force and this Kiev School of Economics, I've been advising and consulting major companies in Ukraine. What we plan, small business, it's already a question to national security, and it played a major part of how our critical infrastructure didn't fall in the first 2 weeks, and how major companies already started preparing and securing their networks, separating operation OTs from ITs, transferring valuable information on clouds and servers outside, and moving some data also outside. So I think contingency planning also plays a major factor in it. What I mean by resilience is always important that state cannot provide 100% guarantees on security and defense. It's really important that private sector also understands that it becomes a target of an enemy. Thank you.
Anna, thank you. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for what you're doing. And as I said to my colleagues here, you're an inspiration, your country and your people, honestly. You know, I personally, I went through another Soviet invasion, and that's why I'm an American. You know, this is fantastic. They're putting all of their weight there. But, you know, when you look at it, your side doesn't have to win. As a colleague of mine have said, you have to wait long enough that the Russians who ask for peace in your terms. And that is a tall order, but I think it's doable because, you know, thankfully, at least I can say about our country, a $13.6 billion aid package has been approved by our Congress. I think President Biden already has announced the $8 billion in military, $800 million and $186 billion in humanitarian aid. There will be a NATO high level at heads of state level meeting on the 24th. We know that our President Biden, will be there in Brussels. I think this is shifting the entire security paradigm of Europe since World War II. I mean, Putin has managed not only to, you said there's not been Ukrainian studies, and you know, remember when we talked about it, always there was this idea that of Ukraine not really, I think, you know, being separate. Now I think that issue is finished for, you know, and Ukraine is countries such as, you know, Finland and Sweden that have stayed on the neutral side since World War II, or thinking. So all of these are assessments that perhaps there is a you know, light at the end of the tunnel. A lot will suffer, and I understand you've seen it. I wish you resilience. I wish you health, your brother, your family, but your whole country. And we as a whole, thank you for the time. Please let us know if we can do anything. But I myself just want to thank you and hope to see you again at Odessa, or maybe this time somewhere else, and we can
Yes.
walk around in those beaches and have, talk about this as a past and learn from it and make Ukraine even more beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Amin.
Major Brown, do you have anything else to say, or we close it out?
No, I really just again on behalf of the Krulak Center staff here and our director and Marine Corps University, we're extremely grateful to be able to share your unique frontline perspective for the benefit of our students and the community that we connect with. I've said it a lot in the last couple of weeks, like, we're watching this, it's a horrifying tragedy we're watching unfold in real time, but thanks to the perspectives and the insights that you and your fellow countrymen are able to give us, we hope we can learn and make something better down the road, so that this isn't something that we see again, or that we can be better prepared for. So just thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me. I'm sure that I also believe that Ukraine is already a knowledge provider for its allies. And after this, we will be just more having more knowledge, more battlefield knowledge. What we would need more, it's more innovation and security and defense, more in other spheres, and of course, security guarantees definitely. I'm sure we will come out from this on our terms. It just costs lives daily. So that's why my only ask for you is just to keep this topic high on our agenda and speak to your students. I'm always open to share insights and be connected. And I'm just grateful for your support. And this is already support for providing a floor. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm done.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.